All right, everyone, the red light is on and we are recording. This is Mark back for another episode of the Veteran Semi-Professional. So today's an interview episode where I'm interviewing a veteran about their life and career after the military, all in an effort to help you if you're still in or maybe recently transitioned and trying to figure out, what do I do once I can put my hands back in my pockets, grow my beard out, and start wearing these things called civilian clothes. This is the show for you. Okay. So I interview other veterans because I want to point out, mistakes maybe that they made or successes they've made in order to help you have the best transition you can have and the best, post-military life and career that you can have possible. All right. So super pumped for today's guest. Chris is a really awesome guy and he's in a very successful career and is also doing some really good things in the veteran community. So Chris, if you just take a minute and introduce yourself, I'd appreciate it.
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me. And more importantly, thank you for what you're doing for the community. It means so much. So my name is Chris Perkins. I am the president of CoinFund. We are a Web3 native investment management firm that started in 2015. And we focus on venture and liquid strategies really across Web3. So it's an incredibly exciting place to be.
Yeah. And if you're sitting here wondering right now, like what the hell is Web3 and everything, don't worry. I'm going to ask Chris these basic questions and everything too. Okay. So, awesome. Don't worry if you're going into this blind and stupid. We all kind of are in some way. All right. So Chris, first, what'd you do in the military?
Yeah. So I was a U.S. Naval Academy graduate, class of 1997. We lost to West Point for 4 years straight. And after that, I went to graduate school via a program actually called BJEP, got a degree from Georgetown University. And then I went off into this exciting adventure called the United States Marine Corps. I ended up being an artilleryman, an artillery officer. And I spent, I'm originally from New Jersey. So when they asked me where I wanted to be stationed, I obviously said Hawaii. Did 3 years there. Pumped out the Pacific a few times, went to Okinawa for 2 years, came back, and I went to a battery commander, a company commander school called EWS in Virginia. And along the way, 9/11 had happened. We were in Japan at the time. My sister was impacted. She was okay, but she was injured. And I knew that I needed to stay in. And I eventually was ready to go. I was in that battery commander, that company commander course. And I actually got orders to Mississippi to train reservists. And that really didn't work for me. So I ended up taking a guy out that night who had orders to go to Camp Pendleton. I know they're deploying. We had a few beers, maybe a lot of beers. And I was able to convince him to switch with me. So I took those orders, and next thing I knew, I was in Camp Pendleton, spent a few days there. Then I went into Iraq as a combat replacement, landed in downtown Ramadi. General Jim Mattis greeted me as I got off the truck. And I worked for him in 1st Marine Division in Ramadi for a while, for a few months. And then I saw a desperate need to go down to the infantry battalion that was slugging it out in downtown Ramadi with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. And again, jumped on the table, said, "Get me down there. I want to get into the action with the Marine Corps, with the Marines." I had a degree in a couple of like low intensity conflict things, and I thought I could make a difference. And so off I went. I spent 7 months with 2-5, really in the thick of it in 2004 downtown Ramadi. We took significant casualties. I think the number was around 260 or so wounded, and about 15 guys were killed. So it was a tough fight, very difficult urban combat.
Yeah.
Eventually, was going to stay because, I felt like, many vets, like when you're there on the ground in that type of environment, felt like I was really making a difference. But they offered me to go back to Pendleton and said I could take command, and you just can't say no to command. So
right.
I transitioned back, became battery commander of Fox Battery, 2nd Battalion, 11th Marines. And then I picked my head up and I said, you know what, I've been doing this for a while. Thought about some other government jobs, but then I started thinking about what was next in my life. But that sums up the military career.
Well, I just happened to see this post on Instagram right before this, so cannot verify whether or not this is true or not. But the story that I saw was that Mattis just got married to someone that he met in a bar, and they got married. They got married in Vegas. I can't verify this is true, but if he did, that's like the most Marine story ever, which is just a great testament to the fact, if this is true, that Mattis is the most Marine of Marines, that he met a woman at a bar and got married in Vegas. Yeah.
Wow, he's pulling Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I got to reach out to
Again,
him.
don't know if this is true or not. I just happened to see this right before we logged on. So
Well, I
yeah,
hope it's not fake news, and I
yeah,
hope he's found the love of his life.
yeah. Me too. Because he definitely deserves it. The guy's given a lot to this country.
Wow.
So anyway, yeah. So first I want to talk about your transition from the Marines. What was the good, bad, and the ugly? What were the speed bumps that you might want to point out to people coming in behind you?
Yeah, so I had to make a decision. Do I continue down this path? I'd been in 9 years, and I told myself if I went over 10, I might as well do 20. Um, like General Mattis, I was single, and I actually met a woman. She was on the East Coast. I was on the West Coast. It made no sense, um, but she was a banker, and I started. The more time I spent with her, the more I learned about what was happening in finance and the global U.S. as a global financial hub, the center of the global economy. That appealed to me because it really was what made our country great. And the more I unpacked it and learned about it, I found it super interesting. And so I had orders to go somewhere else, and I brought it home to this woman. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And she said, you can do that, and I'm sure it would be great, and you'll be excellent at it. It'll be a lot more of the same. But you have your buddy down there and from 1-3 on the trading floor in Lehman. Why don't you just go in there and see if you like it? I mean, it's worth it to see what else is out there, Chris. So I said, you know what? That's smart. I got to see what there is. So I literally kicked the door in at Lehman Brothers. This is 2006, and I was astonished. I was in the middle of the trading floor. There's incredible intensity. It just felt like being back with my Marine Corps unit at the time. Just the level of intensity, a lot, always like things were happening, information was coming at you, and I was like, wow, I kind of like this. I spoke to my friend. He said, hey, do you have a suit? I'm like, yes, I have a suit. Do you have a resume? And what I did was my brother-in-law at the time had been studying at Harvard Business School. So I said, hey, Jimmy, can you send me the format for the resume? And so I wanted to look and smell and feel like all these other candidates. So I put my resume in his format. And wouldn't you know, one thing led to the next. And they were making a ton of money at the time. And they're like, hey, why should we hire you? And I said, well, it's pretty simple. I'm an artillery guy, and what I do is I make very timely and accurate calculations, and I manage risk. And by the way, if I get my calculations or my risk wrong, people die. Isn't that what you do? Don't you guys like crunch numbers and then take risk-based decisions? And they're like, wow, I never thought about it that way. And so, the story resonated with a lot of the folks at the time. There's a lot of testosterone in the room. They wanted to hear the war stories, and I've had plenty of them. And next thing I knew, I got an offer, and they said, hey, here's your offer. We'll bring you in, we'll figure it out. And I said, well, I don't want to be brought in to figure something out. I want to be set up for success. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I know you have an associate class, and an associate class is where they put MBAs together. They also have an analyst class, the banks, where they put recent graduates together. They form a cohort. That cohort is a network, and networks are imperative for success wherever you are. If anyone listens to anything that I have to say, it's about your network, right? And I said, I really want the network. I have a graduate degree. Put me in the associate class. And they said, no. I said, what do you mean no? They said, well, that's only reserved for MBA students from the top MBAs. And I said, well, wait a second. You guys are a private company. There's no laws or regulations that prohibit me from being in that class. And what makes you great is your ability to think on the fly and to make smart risk-based decisions. So if you're saying no to that, maybe this company's not right for me. I can go down the street and talk to Goldman, and maybe we can work something out. And they said, whoa, wait a second. You got it. We're going to put you in the class. Just don't tell anyone that you didn't go to the top MBA. We don't want to upset those schools. I said, okay. And so I rocked into the first class, had very little economic experience, no MBA, barely knew how to use Excel. And there I was. And I think the first question that they had was, oh, you're the Marine guy. How many tattoos do you have? And that's how it all started. And because I'm scared of my mom, I have no tattoos. And so that's how it got started. Went through that class, and after you go through a class like that, and I I over-indexed on leadership and the ability to like all the leadership things. I like way over-indexed on. I was completely under-indexed on the technical side, and so it was a very obvious gap as I started interviewing with various businesses around the bank. Some businesses would reject me right off the bat. They're like, "Look, dude, you don't have the technical savvy. Like, you're just going to fail here." And the second thing I'll tell people about networking is that when you look for a job, you're not looking for a job. You're actually looking for people. Find the right people, and those people, if you get them to hire you, those are going to be the folks that out of the gate are going to train you and they're going to pay you, right? So don't go for the hot job, go for the right people. And what happened was everyone in the class wanted to go into mortgages because structured products and mortgages were just booming back then. And you could make $1 zillion in no time whatsoever. So they were killing their mothers just to try to get into the mortgage business. And I looked for people, ended up in the derivative space. So then I landed on a desk and we went our separate ways. So happy to talk about that, but I know you want to ask me about my transition. So maybe I'll pause and see if there's anything I missed.
Well, I do want to go back to, when you were still in the Marines, kind of looking at post-military options and like that interest in the world of finance and everything. Can you talk maybe like a little more, some details and some specifics about like what was really attracting you and making you think this is kind of maybe the world that I want to get into?
I had no idea what I wanted to do. But I knew it was a big world. And what I started to do was just find people to talk to. And what I found was that I could reach out to just about anybody and they would take my call because I was a fresh combat vet. There weren't too many of us, there were very, very few of us in New York City at the time. And there hadn't been since the Vietnam War, or maybe Gulf War I, but so I could open any door that I wanted and people wanted to talk to me. And so I reached across many, many different industries and I wanted something that was exciting. I was very much in search of culture. I wanted to make a ton of money, right? Because why not? And I wanted to be able to leverage whatever success that I had, including, any ability to make money, to turn it back on service and to redeploy it in ways that I can help. And like, I remember talking to one of my colonels as I was leaving. He said, make as much money as possible, be as successful as possible, because that's the only way that you're able to give back. And that was very hardwired into me, is that how can I become successful so that I can help other people? And I found all that in finance. You could make a very good living and it would give you the ability to excel. Now, again, it was a search for people and that's what brought me to Lehman.
Yeah. And what I really love about your story is that initial conversation of, hey man, like you don't have the hard skills that we're looking for. You don't have the background. And then kind of like reframing, what you did in the Marines to something that like they understood in their language. That's a really important skill. I'm remembering a previous guest that I had by the name of Patrick Dossett. He was a Navy SEAL, went to Wharton, and I think he was interviewing at Google. And they were like, it was for an operations role. And they're like, hey man, like, you don't have any experience in operations. And at first he was like, well, I guess you're right. I don't really have any experience in, Google operations. And he kind of paused and he was like, wait, I do have experience. And then he started talking about, going through the mission planning of, putting a SEAL team, putting a SEAL platoon, like, into an underwater vehicle and going and doing a mission onto a beach or something. And they're like, oh, like you do kind of know how all these pieces can work together. And it's not the same terminology. It's not the same, resources or something, but we see how that overlaps into what it is that we do. So I think you have a great story and a great lesson for everyone listening, and having that wherewithal to recognize how you needed to translate, what you did in the Marines to something that, the person you're trying to talk to, convince to hire you, that they'll understand. And then also just having like the confidence to be able to push back and be able to say, listen, I don't have to have you. There's someone else this conversation and like my point will land with. And if I walk out of this room without an offer from you, like that's okay. I'll figure something else out. And so I think that's a good story for everyone listening here, like how you can approach this. It's not like the military where you have to just take the job that, Department of the Army or Department of the Navy hands to you and says, here are your orders, go to your next thing. You have a lot of say in planning this path for yourself in your post-military life.
Exactly. I like to say, walk the walk and talk the talk. it's very important to study so that you understand how those folks that you're interviewing with talk, the vernacular that they use, the words that they use. And you also need to dress like them, right? You have to be able so that they can kind of see, oh yeah, I can see this guy coming into my desk.
Yeah. So you were at Lehman Brothers, right?
Yeah.
Right around the time, they fell down. Can you talk like what that, were you there when they ended up collapsing, or like, did you get out beforehand, or what was that experience like?
Yeah. So I showed up, worked on the desk within 18 months. This is 2006. My boss quit. He said, hey, I'm going to go into sales somewhere else. Good luck, kid. And what I did from there is I said, raised my hand and I said, hey, I can run this desk. Give me a chance. And throughout my career, I said time and time again, just give me a chance. And they said, okay, we'll see what happens. And I took over that business. It was, I was running our derivatives prime brokerage. And I know people may not know what that means. Long story short, I got into the derivatives space. And a derivative is like, it's like a security, which is like a thing that you can exchange. I mean, it's really based on, it derives its value from something else, and it's contracts between different counterparties. So I was in the middle of this business that was helping hedge funds and asset managers manage their derivatives. And so he left. I raised my hand to give me a shot. I built that business up vertically because I understood it. The other thing is that a lot of these businesses that people talk about, not all of them, but people make them sound so hard and complex. They're actually not. You just distill it down. In the military, you get dropped into a new business every 2-3 years. You got to figure it out. So it just takes a lot of work. And like what I did is I knew that I had to get my technical acumen up. So I would get up at 4 a.m. I would study because I could control that, right? I could control how fast I could learn. And so I'd study in finance, they have this thing called the CFA. So I studied for the CFA all morning. And I worked really, really hard. I controlled what I could control. First guy in, last guy out. And I just worked on my weakness to complement my strength. Took that business, drove it up, and then wouldn't you know it, was in the epicenter of the global financial crisis. I had a $100 billion book, which actually is not that huge in the context of the numbers we were talking, at Lehman Brothers. And boom, I watch it go bankrupt right before my eyes. And again, what did I do? I leveraged my experience as a U.S. Marine. I never forget, I walked into the office, people were screaming, crying under their desks, didn't know what to do, thumb in their mouth, and I walked in and I was like, okay, look, no one's shooting at me for a change. And the phone would ring and clients would be very upset. And I'd say, listen, this is what I know. This is what I don't know. Let me help you out. One client called me, and he had a huge problem. He'd sent a bunch of money to the bank and he wasn't supposed to. He's like, can you help me? And I did. I worked my tail off. I found out where his wire went. I reversed it and I saved his job, and he became my first client at my next shop. So in the middle of that, I've always also found that in the middle of the largest crises is where you build your best relationships. And I guess you should never let a good crisis go to waste, because there are also massive opportunities. The day after we went bankrupt, my phone rang. It was Citigroup. And they said, do you want a job? And I said, well, what kind of package do you have? And they said, it's a wonderful package, Chris. It's called The Job. And so I got on the C train, headed to Citi, and then I showed up at Citi the following day, and all of my trades with Lehman were gone because we went bankrupt. And so I had to literally clean up my own mess. And there was still a ton of carnage going on in Wall Street at the time. But again, just put my head down, tried to figure out my new environment. And remember, I talked about opportunity. Well, right after that, new laws were passed. Dodd-Frank was passed, which completely changed finance as we know it. And I was in the middle of this derivatives industry, and the law said, listen, we're going to take your $700 trillion derivatives industry and take it from unregulated into regulated. And they put out thousands and thousands of pages of regulation and comments, et cetera. And I saw this as a huge opportunity because nobody really knew how to do it. It was a brand new business. Nobody had any experience. And for me, it was the level setter that I needed, right? Because I was over indexed on all that people leadership training. I was under indexed on the technical side of things, but in this new environment, nobody had any technical experience because it was brand new. And so, I just reverted to what I knew. I worked my tail off to learn and get an edge and know more than anybody else in that subject matter. And then eventually I was allowed to build a team. And there's nothing better for a Marine than to put together a task organization to accomplish a mission. So I did that. And I remember I loved this. I mean, I was just a young vice president. And, again, I raised my hand at the firm. I said, give me a chance. Let me build this business for you. I will do it. And they said, who are you? Young vice president. I'm like, yeah, but I can do this. And they said, okay, we don't know who else to give it to. Go for it, kid. And so I remember just going on to these industry calls and being up against, big swinging, managing director from another company. I totally outworked that individual and just able to just navigate and build a business. Nobody expected much out of Citi after the crisis. We had a very difficult crisis. I assembled my global team and we built the largest regulated business, one of the only businesses to come out of the crisis, which was pretty it was pretty amazing to see over a couple of years. And then, I'll just finish off my career if that's all right, in the banking sector. So that business was going very well. Started making some good revenue for the firm, and we were a number one business, and people were pretty pleased with what we were able to accomplish. They tapped me on the shoulder in 2018 and said, hey, Chris, we got a problem. I said, okay, what can I do for you? And they said, yeah, we want you to look at this other business and we'll come back to us in 2 weeks. Tell us what you think. And looked at that business. They had a lot of problems from a risk management perspective. And so I said, guys, you have some issues. They said, yep, it's yours. And I said, okay, thank you. And the day that I was announced as the global head, Bloomberg reported that business lost $180 million. And that was what I was walking into. It was the day of our Christmas party. They fired the previous leadership of that business, and I walked in the door. And, it was such a terrible time for that team. Got them in a room, fired them up, told them we were going to get through this together, integrated them to my other team, took them out to our Christmas party, and off we went. The holiday party, I should say. And off we went. It took us 9 months. I worked with 12 regulators across the globe, worked with the board of directors, and we cleaned that business, brought it back to number one. Again, because of the team that we were able to assemble and the culture we were able to drive. And then by the time I left the bank, I was running a third global business, our global futures business. Futures have been around for hundreds of years, actually, used to hedge listed derivatives, like, really got their base in agriculture products, but then extended into financial products as well. So had around 725 or so direct and indirect reports. It was over $500 million business in revenue. And that was my career in traditional finance. And then I decided to pivot into something new.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to talk about that right in a second. Two things I want to point out about your story for everyone listening. One, that moment of, you described going into the office, kind of during the collapse, and people are, sucking their thumbs and freaking out and losing their minds and everything. And you said, I'm not going to shot at, like, this is okay. I'm going to physically, like, be all right in this environment right now. And I think, like, that is a superpower that veterans can bring to the table. Okay. And I also encourage people, and there'll be kind of two sides to this that I'll talk about, of we have been trained and thrown into environments where we can learn to be very comfortable with risk and uncertainty. Right. And we learn to frame it in very different manners of, this is just, like, my life, limb, or eyesight is not a risk right now. Let me really figure out, like, this problem is not unsolvable for me. Okay. And then the other side of that I think, is worth pointing out to people is, it's also important as the leader in the room to look at the people around you and realize that this might be their worst day. Our worst day might be, on a block in Ramadi, or, on a patrol in Helmand or something. This might be their worst day, and understanding that, their point of reference on what is a shitty situation is very different than what yours might be. That's and right. Understanding and, like, bringing that empathy is only going to help you as a leader in that scenario. Okay. And then the second thing I want to point out, you talked about, like, getting up at 4 a.m. and realizing that, your technical expertise needed some strengthening. And I've heard that story in various facets and various forms and tons of different industries on the show, of someone who, maybe someone gave them a chance and, like, they felt comfortable with the soft skills that we got from the military and everything, but they recognized, hey, I don't have the hard skills to match and be able to, compete and outperform my peers in this environment. And it's going to take some extra work for me of coming in early, of staying late, of doing some extra classes, of doing some studying on my own in order for me to get up just to where I need to be. And then, a little bit more even than if I want to take it beyond that and everything. All right. So then, before we get into your pivot into this new space, the question I do want to ask, you built this team, you, hired people and everything. What did you learn about, building a team and hiring people and identifying the types of people that you want to bring into a new business unit?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes into my mind is diversity. Not for diversity's sake. Like, we actually kind of take diversity for granted in the military because you get people from all different walks of life and all different states and regions and everything else. But you really need to make sure that the people have different viewpoints and different capabilities. You don't want homogeneous people trying to solve the same problem. So that was one. I needed geographic diversity. I needed gender diversity for different reasons, like because it built the strongest team. And then I needed to make sure people that were a cultural fit, people that weren't afraid to roll their sleeves up, people that you want diverse talent, but you also want shared values. And that's what I focused on.
No, I think there's a great lesson for people to learn. All right. So when did this wild world of crypto first come onto your radar? Like when did you start kind of hearing about it? And like, when did you start thinking, I think I might want to go do something in this space?
Yeah. So I read a book in 2016. And I was like, my gosh, this thing's going to be pretty big. And I realized, like, my thesis then, and it is now, is like, wow, a ledger, and I'll maybe distill crypto down for everybody. Ledgers started in Mesopotamia 7,000 years ago. And what a ledger does is it allows you to track title of assets. It allows you to track assets and liabilities. And in Mesopotamia, it really formed the basis. Once they figured this thing out, it formed the basis of an economy. And if you know anything about history, Mesopotamia, that part of the world, led civilizations. It led art, science, culture, math, algebras from there for centuries. And I think a lot of that was due to that central ledger that was able to bring it all together. There was a second innovation in the Renaissance where double entry bookkeeping was invented. And again, you saw this explosion of math, science, culture, etc. In 2008, there was another innovation to the ledger. And yeah, it was done by some anonymous guy, where using computer code, you're able to affect permissionless transfer of title using this thing called the blockchain. And when you think about what a blockchain is, a ledger, it sits at the heart of an economy, and the economy sits at the center of a civilizations effectively. And that was Bitcoin, but Bitcoin kind of, it was the first, it is the oldest. It's very decentralized. And we've seen, its value has gone up and value has gone down. The second iteration of crypto was really this product called Ethereum in 2014, 2015. And that gave birth to something called smart contracts, where, traditionally you have a relationship with a person, that person gives you some money, you give them a service or a good. So you need to have a degree of trust. This allows for smart contracts where if the conditions are met, then that value is exchanged. And that really gave birth to this entire new ecosystem that we're calling Web3. That what it really is at the end of the day is it allows you to form communities leveraging code. And let me maybe step back a little bit further and walk you through how we see Web3 versus Web2 versus Web1, which is probably the best way to think about it. In the 90s, when I was in my college dorm, that was Web1. Web1 is very fragmented. There was no community. This is before Google, Amazon, Facebook, all that other stuff, right? Where you'd have to manually log onto your server. There weren't these groups. Like, you kind of used it to do various tasks, but it was very fragmented. If you look at it against civilization, it was kind of like hunters gatherers, if that makes sense. No organization. Then Web2 came along, and Web2 fed into this innately human instinct to form groups. And when I think of Web2, I think of things like Facebook, right? But the problem with Web2, it's very much like mankind evolved, civilization evolved. It's very much like a sovereign or a monarchy, where we are out there working the lands. We're enjoying the experience, in monarchies like security, whatever. But all the economics that accrue, personal data, everything goes right up to to a king, a sovereign, and that sovereign may be called Facebook, where they take all the data, all the value, and you're left with no value. You just have this experience that you're working
the
there.
image I'm getting right now is like a European feudal system, right? Like
exactly
the peasants working in the field and the kings collecting everything. And
that's that's Web 2, right?
Right.
So then mankind evolved from hunters gatherers. Now these monarchs come in, and then we have this thing called Web 3, and this is where we invest. And this is where this is the world that we're entering. Web 3 allows communities to form. It leverages that part of Web 2, and it feeds into this innately tribal instinct that we have, but it does a couple things. Through cryptocurrencies, you're able to allocate tokens and raise a treasury, right? So you give that group a treasury so they can deploy money or value for their ideals. You also equip that group with tokens, and embedded in those tokens are voting rights and governance tokens. And so the community can vote upon how to deploy that capital, which, gosh, it looks and smells and feels like democracy. So think of Web 1 through Web 3 going from hunters-gatherers to monarchies. Now we have this ideal of democracy. It's not good or bad, it's technology, but if you think about it, if that community is got good ideals and is trying to do the right thing, and we're forming a community in this space, we call it VITA, Veterans and Digital Assets. I would love people to join our Discord or look us up. Like I said, Veterans and Digital Assets. But anyway, if the ideals are good, and for VITA, we're trying to help veterans find jobs, that's great. But you could also have these groups that are funded that have ideals that are not so good, and that's something that we need to be aware of. So that's Web 3. As you start unpacking Web 3 further, we call it the creator-based economy. So if you're an artist, right, you can tokenize your art and you can sell it direct rather than having to go through a broker and you're left with 30 cents on the dollar, et cetera. So that's Web 3, powered by blockchain technology, powered by cryptocurrencies. And then you hear things such as NFTs, or I describe this community being formed that's called the DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization. If you haven't heard about DAOs before, you'll hear them at some point in the future. I'm sure most people have heard of NFTs by now, but these are some of the verticals that we look at as we look at Web 3.
Chris, I don't think anyone, when we started this conversation about kind of like, what is crypto and blockchain, like how you got started in this, I don't think anyone was expecting you to start in Mesopotamia 7,000 years ago and describing, how the ledger, just, some guy writing, on a cuneiform tablet somewhere, that kind of changed the world and like how their society was organized and structured. But just the simple power of record keeping and being able to see, what transactions have occurred is immensely powerful.
Yeah. One of the critiques actually of Web3, the blockchain technology, and yes, people will say, oh, it's nefarious. I think that's because they probably don't understand it. In fact, blockchain technology is one of the challenges with it. It's too transparent. And so when you look at issues around AML, KYC, OFAC, or nefarious behavior, talk to law enforcement officials. Before blockchain technology, they would find the bad guy or the bad lady, but they couldn't find the transactions. Now they've got the transactions, they just got to find the bad guy, and it's a lot easier to do it that way. So we're seeing opportunity from my seat across the spectrum, and it's an incredibly exciting place to be. It's a new asset class. I'm not giving investment advice on this. I'm not telling people to invest their hard-earned money in cryptocurrencies. It's very volatile, but it's definitely a space people should be paying attention to because value is being created.
Yeah. Okay. So like, you kind of talked about how this kind of came to you, how you started realizing and learning about it and everything. What then was like the first action to kind of take a step into this world career-wise? What did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I tried to do was to implement the technology at my current position in the city. I tried over and over again to try to get them to deploy and embrace the technology. Thought about leaving, becoming a founder, but risk tolerance. I had 2 little kids, and I was building a career. I wasn't ready to do that. And then over the years, I got to a point where I saw the amount of innovation. It was just so crystal clear to me about where the world was going, was that I needed to be part of it. And at that time, I'll tell you one thing. Every single job I've ever been able to land has been because of a veteran. I will tell you that a veteran got me that job at Lehman. When I went to Citi, it was a veteran who's called me up to get me across. And I reached out to a veteran that I knew who was running a business in Web3. I'm like, hey man, help me out, lay out this landscape for me. He was a Marine pilot. And he did. He's like, hey, this is how to think about it. This is how to think about it. These are the players. These are who you need to know. And then I just went for it, started building a network, started getting in front of all the different players out there. And I initiated that people search again. Again, not looking for the product, looking for the people. And that brought me to the partners at CoinFund. And I saw this team that just had such differentiated capabilities. And I had a unique perspective and background, and I knew I was going to be able to add a ton of value.
Yeah. So in a minute, I definitely want to get into a conversation about Vita here and everything. Can you talk a little bit about, what exactly CoinFund does and like how you all think about, allocating capital towards crypto related investments?
Yeah, sure. So we have a number of different strategies. We have a seed strategy that focuses on young founders, young companies, not in age, but in maturity of their business. So we have a seed and a pre-seed strategy. We have a venture strategy that looks at more mature companies and founders and protocols. And then we have a strategy, a liquid strategy that looks at liquid tokens. And so we look at these various protocols, tokens at the code level. We've got a very technical team, a diverse team that will understand, like, what does the code's trying to do? How does it do it? What's the market that they're trying to address, the total addressable market? Is there a product market fit? How big can this thing be? And then we work closely with those founders to help them really build their companies. And for me, it's been just so wonderful to get back to what I love doing, which is helping folks build companies or teams, frankly.
Yeah, it's a super fun space to be in. I encourage anyone, like, if you get the opportunity to be around just like the ideation and the work that goes into forming something new, whether that be a startup or even like a new business within a major organization or something. It's an exciting place to be, and that's been a theme I've heard consistently on this show. Can you talk a little bit more about veterans and digital assets, Vita, like what you all do and kind of like the offerings that are there for people who might be interested in this world?
Yeah, thank you. It's a super exciting part of my professional life, has always been trying to support veterans along the way. We started something called VOWS, Veterans on Wall Street, back in 2011. And so I tried to start a veterans network at Lehman in 06, 07. They said, great idea, we're not ready for it. But we did have a couple of brunches. We brought a couple of people across. 2009, I started the first veterans network at Citigroup, and it just started exploding. 2011, I remember watching the Obama State of the Union, and Congress agreed on only two things at the time. They thought veterans were good and banks were bad. And I was a veteran at a bank, so I'm like, let me bring some veterans into the banking industry and see what we can do. So we did. We got all of our competitors together. This never happens, and we formed a consortium to put our competitive differences aside, just to focus on veterans. The goal is to raise money for charities and to bring as many people into our space as possible via recruiting. And man, over the years since 2011, we raised about $15 million. We had a strategic relationship with the Bob Woodruff Foundation. And we put thousands of people through our training at our various symposiums, brought standing members of Congress. It'll always be one of the highlights of my professional career. When I transitioned to crypto, I realized that we had an incredible opportunity because crypto is exploding. It's going to change everything. And jobs were being created. And by the way, we needed the values of veterans to come into the space. There's some incredible characters, great character. You get everything, right? But there's also some difficult characters in the space. And I knew that the more veterans that we had in the space, the better the industry would be. That's just generally how it always works in my experience. So Vita was established, Veterans and Digital Assets. It means life, because we want to give new life to veterans. We want to find them careers in Web3 and their spouses. It's great. Everything about crypto is about community. And wouldn't you know it, we formed a community like almost instantly. We have a Discord, which maybe we can put in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a Twitter handle as well. And we were able to form this community almost overnight with hundreds of people. And the thing that like blew me away the most was just the amount of sophistication of thought of people that are in that Discord, and all vets, all looking to help each other out. And then the community, like, this is not a central thing. It's not something that I control. It's community driven. It's very important for me that it's decentralized and that the community decides what the community wants to do. Had their first IRL in real life event in San Diego a few weeks back. They're about to have one in Washington, D.C. in a couple of weeks in July. I think it's going to be July 27th. Check out, our sites for more information if you happen to be in Washington, D.C. So now this community is like growing. It's evolving. It's creating all with the same goals and ideals in mind. Events are being put together. Sponsors are coming together. We have a backstop with Bunker Labs, who's helping us with the 501c3 for donations. It's just an awesome part of my professional life. And I know our goal is not to profit from this at all. I don't intend to make one red cent. My goal is to help as many veterans as possible.
Yeah, I'll also say for anyone out there who, if this is piquing any curiosity, so one, like, the link to the Discord will absolutely be in the show notes for everyone. I'm on there. There's tons of great conversations that go on and everything. It's some really cool stuff. And then you also have a podcast too. And I think I listened to the one you did. I listened to the one you did with Pomp. You're a great interviewer. It was a great episode. Yeah.
Not as good as you, man, Mark, but I'm trying to learn. Pomp's great. He's a vet. The number of vets in the space would kind of blow your mind.
Yeah.
People don't realize it. And being able to bring everyone together is super special. So, and Pomp he's got a bunch of folks. He's got a hiring bulletin board. We have one. We're all pulling in the same direction. And so it's just amazing to see.
Yeah, it's super cool. And it's the whole, how quickly you all were able to like build it up into kind of a whole ecosystem for veterans interested in this, both from like the content you put out and then like how the Discord kind of organized itself. Everything has just been really cool for me to watch. Our mutual friend Bobby is very intricately involved in this, and I just love kind of watching him take off with it.
Yeah, Bobby McKinnon is the best. Tom Dixon, very involved. There's a guy named Co. Like, it's just amazing to see people step up. Not for material gain. I want them to be very rich and successful, clearly, but they just do it for the good of the community. It's amazing to see.
Yeah, it's truly awesome. So, definitely the links to the Discord and the podcast and everything will be in the show notes for everyone. So if you're interested, definitely go check it out. Well, Chris, this has been an awesome conversation. This has been a total pleasure to talk to you. You've had a really cool, interesting career to be able to talk to you about and everything, and lots of good lessons for people on the show. So in a minute, I'm going to pass it back over to you just for, parting shots you want to give to the crowd. But before we do, there's a question I always ask my guests. And that's, if you can think back to your time in the Marines, what was the best and or worst chow hall you ever ate at?
Gosh, best chow hall I ever had was, worst. It's the same answer. Both were in Ramadi. MRE's lunch, just kind of brutal there at Hurricane Point. No offense to anyone. But the best meal I ever had was I got invited over to Shark Base, which was like the special ops guys across the river. And they cooked me a steak, like after not having a steak or a salad for like 9 months. Like, that was the best experience I ever had. Worst was probably across the river there in Hurricane Point.
Yeah. Sometimes that's how it goes. You can have just an amazing one right next to a shitty one. And that's just kind of how it works out sometimes. Yeah. Well, Chris, again, thank you for coming on. I just want to pass it back over to you for any parting shots you want to give to people as they're trying to think about, what their post-military career in life looks like.
Yeah, please. We're all here to help. The community's engaged. Feel free to ping me on Twitter at Perkins CR97. Or hit our Discord. And again, if you have any questions, you need advice, you want to learn more about our industry, everyone's willing to help you. So thanks for listening, and always here to help. Semper Fi.
All right, Chris, appreciate you coming on. Looking forward to see Vita continue to be a fantastic asset for veterans as it already is. So thanks for coming on. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right.
Thanks, Mark. Have a good one.
Bye.